What's up guys, Metal571 here, and today I'm going to be talking about the AKG K371. Disclaimer to start this off, Harman slash AKG slash Samsung, I think they're all under that roof now, sent this to me. So this is not provided by a viewer. I don't own this, well, not yet. And that's where the headphone came from, if you're curious. So this is a $149 32 ohm 50 millimeter titanium coated closed back dynamic headphone, and it's really mainly targeted. It's a professional headphone is what it's targeted at, and it actually says it on there. You guys probably can't read that because this is not like an 8K webcam or something, but that's what it is. It's got a detachable cable. It folds. It weighs very little. It's pretty comfortable once the headband breaks in. It's just all around hits a lot of bases at once. And let me tell you, when I put this on my head, I was so shocked that if some of you are following me on Twitter, you probably saw the huge hype tweet. And thankfully, believe it or not, it's still living up to that. The honeymoon period has not really diminished the hype behind this headphone. So let's get started talking about the sound. The bass here is mostly measurably flat, meaning if you measure it on a frequency response chart using a head and torso simulator, I imagine, or the mini DSP ears that I have, which is not a particularly accurate measurement system. But anyway, that's a whole nother video. The bass is mostly flat. There isn't really much going on in terms of coloration, except there's quite a significant bump in the sub bass. So like around under 50 hertz, there starts to become a big bump way at the bottom. And I think that's this headphone is tuned to the Harman response, the Harman target, which Tile over at Interfidelity, who's since retired, has talked about many, many times in the past. There's a target developed by Sean Olive through much research. There's a lot to read up on that, but to make it short, the preference curve that came out of that study does expect there to be a bit of a bass bump, so I'm not surprised to see that in the response, although it is a little bit unusual in that it's much more shelved. It's moved way lower into the sub bass only, whereas normally the curve would call for a sub bass shelf, not sub bass, just a bass shelf that really kind of ends at 200 hertz. This one ends starting at the very bottom at about 50 or 60 hertz, which is unusual. So that's what it sounds like. And interestingly, if you wear glasses like I do, you'll notice that putting them on versus taking off your glasses can change this sub bass boost. So the seal it's definitely seal dependent. Another thing to note, and I'm going to be comparing this headphone a lot with these other headphones. The one I'm wearing is actually this headphone replaces is the K553 Pro. There's also the K553 Mark II. There's the K550, K550 Mark II, and Mark III. They're all really the same sound. I've had these for a couple of years now, I think. And then the other headphone I'm going to talk about that's below the price range is this Creative Arvana Live, which we just call the CAL, C-A-L, in the headphone community. So unlike the CAL, the K371 does not really run out of headroom when you crank it up to make it louder. And so that kind of hints at me that this has got a pretty low harmonic distortion. If I had to guess, I've never seen the measurements. This is all going by ear in the bass because they can take quite a lot of bass and quite a lot of volume without running out of ability to reproduce that bass volume. So it's nice. Now moving on to the mid-range here, this is a very accurate sounding mid-range on a headphone, and it's so accurate that I was wondering why I liked the way the mids sounded so much on this immediately upon putting it on. It's a little bit aggressive in the upper mids, but I'll get to that in a second. But I figured out why it was. It's because I grabbed my HD650 up there, which is, if you don't know, if this is your first review of mine you're watching, the HD650 is my reference headphone for frequency response. The only difference is I prefer about 2 decibels less on that headphone at 3.5K. And this headphone, when you A/B it with the 650, is enormously similar. It's really surprising in tuning, not detail or anything like that, but in tuning, it's really close. When I overlaid the graphs on my mini DSP ears, even though it's not a very accurate system, The mid-range matched almost within about a decibel of the HD650, which was kind of shocking and kind of not shocking at the same time. So that's probably why I like the mid-range here. I hate the term neutral because it's so broad and general and doesn't really mean anything, but so I'm trying to qualify that by saying this has a very HD650-ish kind of sound in the mids, low mids, all the way through the upper mids there. It's a little bit aggressive in the upper mids, and clamping force on your head, which I'll get to later, affects this a bit. I'm not even going to, this is how much I like this headphone, I'm not even going to give you an EQ preset for this headphone because I don't even need it, which is very unusual because I equalize almost everything I listen to. With this one, it's totally optional. But if you want to adjust the mids, I would say the upper mids around 3.5K are a little bit aggressive. So you can cut that by 2 decibels if you want. I think that's what I was doing for like some metal and whatever. But properly recorded music, I don't think you're going to have any issues there. I'm just enormously sensitive to mids and treble, as you guys probably know. And it's better than the K553 here, because the 553 is a little bit more aggressive. It's always had this kind of like slight haziness and graininess over the upper mid-range, and it's a little bit too much. This one, I think, brings it down a little bit over the K553. So I'm happy to hear that. The treble is probably what amazed me the most, actually, though, when I first put this headphone on. It was just so easygoing, yet so right sounding, at least to me. And most of the time I nitpick the crap out of everything I review, and here there's very, very little that I'm complaining about at all. I hear some other reviewers are having some issues around, I think it's like 7 or 8K or something like that. I don't know, I'm not having any problems with the mid-treble being bright on this headphone at all. And if anything, even to me, it sounds a little bit warm. Which is not surprising, as this is a Harman Response headphone, which is not going to be tuned anything like a diffuse field headphone, such as, the HD600, K371, DT880, the latter two being even brighter than DF potentially. So there's just not that much wrong with the treble. I don't really have any peaks to talk about, honestly. It's kind of ridiculous. But just don't expect amazing resolution out of it. I mean, this is still $150. I think that for a closeback in this price range, the detail retrieval is quite adequate and pretty much lines up with the price. I think the K553 might share a driver with this. I don't know that 100% for sure. This headphone sounds a little bit less detailed in the treble than the K553, but it could just be because this headphone's warmer, which kind of creates the illusion of having less detail quite easily. But yeah, don't expect to get like ZMF Atticus, ZMF Icon level detail, and maybe not even HD650 level detail. The treble of this thing. The noticeable thing about the treble to me, the biggest coloration is probably that the Air treble, which is above 10K, goes all the way out to where your hearing ends, around 20K, is a little bit muted. For my preference, I would like a little bit more sparkle there. But other than that, it's got the extension. It's just a bit quiet, but that's just a nitpick, and I think it's pretty good. It's pretty amazing. Like the whole sound signature of this headphone is one of the best frequency responses for a closed back I think I've ever heard. It's very hard to do a closed back that sounds anything like a decent sounding open back, except for, they tend to have a lot more bass in the closed backs a lot of the times. But this one is just, yeah, it's really hits the mark 110% for the price it's going for here. Another thing I want to say about the treble with this headphone, though, is it might lean a little bit too warm for some people doing music production. I know there are a lot of producers out there who are probably coming from something like a DT770. This is going to be a lot less treble than that. So if you're used to a diffuse field headphone, again, you're probably not going to like the treble so much on this. But to me, I've never found diffuse field headphones to sound anything like speakers, and this sounds a lot closer to speakers that I like, at least. So that's just something to note. This is not an aggressively quote-unquote detailed, meaning bright headphone at all. It's quite the opposite, actually, but retains detail quite well despite the warm tone. Soundstage wise here, it's okay. I mean, this is probably the weakest point of the headphone. We fall short a little bit relative to the K553. It's not quite as wide, but it's got a slightly better imaging and a little bit wider soundstage than the Creative Vinyl Live, thankfully, because this is much cheaper. This is like a $60, $70 headphone, I think, now, which I think it's a really good pick for that price. But yeah, this is slightly better than that. So it's nothing like exemplary. I think the DT770 has the K553 beat handily too. And soundstage, I absolutely cannot listen to that headphone because it is so V-shaped and so bright and bassy that it just doesn't sound right at all to me. But the soundstage on it is really good. So that's what the soundstage is like between these headphones. So some other stuff. This is the other category that's not quite sound related. The clamp on this is kind of strong out of the box. I think I was talking about this a little bit earlier. And as you wear it in and break in the headband just by wearing the thing, it will lessen with time. Like, I think my ears were touching the inside of the ear cup when I first got it, and it eventually lowered, and it was much better. And actually, the mids are really aggressive too when I first put it on because of how compressed the pads were from all the clamping force, and that evened out as well. It's not burn-in, it's just the clamp force in this case. So if you don't like the way this sounds right out of the box, leave it stretched gently over a box overnight, or just wear it for a couple hours, and actually I think it'll break in the headband for you. So my ears no longer touch the driver. It's very, very comfortable. I mean, the pads are, actually, I don't know if this is leather or protein leather, but they didn't really bother me much. But if you're in a really warm environment, the usual thing, you might sweat on it and it might get a little bit clammy over time. That's just kind of how, leather pads are. There's no velour pads for this headphone, at least not yet, at the time of shooting this. Yeah, so, and again, if you wear glasses also, the way these sit on your head, it might affect the sub-bass bump. It might lower it, which might be good for you, it might not be good for you, but something to note that if you wear glasses, if they're really thick-rimmed, this may not 100% seal in the sub-bass, but it's nothing like the problems that people have had with the K553 where the bass is just gone. If your head shape is wrong, this clamps more than enough to prevent that from happening. But glasses do partially break the seal, so it's just something to note there. So overall, what does this mean? This is one of the most important closed headphones I think that's come out in years. And this is also the first headphone that specifically mentions in its data sheet that it's targeting the Harman frequency response target. And that's not the only reason why it's so good. I mean, it's a combination, as you just heard, of it has decent detail for the price. The bass has got low harmonic distortion, it sounds like to me. Soundstage is okay for the price as well. But it's a headphone that you don't really need to equalize very much if you like this kind of response that Harman products are developing. The newest ones are all targeting this response, and it's very, very good for that. And the price point is just perfect for it. So on top of that, you get 3 cables. I'm not going to show them here, but you do get a coiled cable and I think 2 straight cables, one shorter, one longer, and a bag, and the thing folds, and it's comfortable, and it's built pretty well. I mean, it just really ticks every target. I mean, every feature is here that you would want from a studio headphone, really. Just to give you an idea of the other headphones I've heard that this easily beats out, at least for me overall: M40X, M50X, MDR7506, MDR V6, SRH440, 840, HD280 Pro, HD300 Pro, HD380 Pro, K550, K553, KNS6400, KNS8400, DT770, and the Custom Studio. I would take this over every single one of those headphones. That's how significant this is. And unless I like the K361 better, which if you haven't seen his review, Olive's Gadgets did a review of the 361 and the 371. He likes the response of the 361 a little bit more. I'll be finding out about that and reviewing that headphone in the coming weeks, because AKG is supposed to be sending me one of those as well. But unless I like that better, and that's a $100 headphone, so if that's really competitive, that's going to also blow up some of these value for price kind of headphones in this category. But as far as I'm concerned, from what I'm hearing from this at $150, this is the standard for a closed back at this price, and I'm serious. Anything under $200, this is the headphone you want to be comparing to. So most likely what's going to happen is I'm going to sell my K553. I might keep it, I'm not sure yet. But I'm going to have to buy this. Unless I like the K361 a lot more, which I doubt. It's probably a similar sound, just a little bit different frequency response if I had to guess. But it's so good that I'm going to buy it, and that's very unusual because I only buy things that I'm going to keep around for reference or if I'm actually going to use them. Like the only headphones I really actively use are the LCD2 and the ZMF Atticus. But I keep around the HT650, HT800, Cal, that kind of thing. So this becomes a reference headphone. It's going to fit into that category. And I'm going to replace usually I was wearing my 380 Pro, my Sennheiser, for monitoring. That's what this is for, real-time monitoring of the mic here. And this is just going to replace it. Because it's so good. I love this thing. It's just great. Seriously, this is my new pick in under $200 for a closed back. And then under $100, I really, really like, as I was saying before, the Arvana Live is still a pretty decent headphone. It's just not at the same, point as this. Also the Cost Porta Pro is an open back that I really like under $100 as well. So this is just awesome. And the last thing I want to say is that the M50X is dead. If you're thinking of buying an M50X, there's really absolutely no reason not to buy this instead because it sounds better. It actually has a sound stage at all. It has more cables and a bag, and it folds. I mean, it just does everything the M50X does way better. And so I just can't see any reason why Audio-Technica should even be selling that headphone anymore because this is just so much better. It's just unbelievable. I was not expecting anything at all when they sent this down because I was like, oh, good, AKG, new model. Okay, fine, it's probably okay. But yeah, it blew me away. So that's the AKG K371. Stay tuned. I'm going to be talking about the K361. So if you're thinking about pulling the trigger on this headphone, you might want to wait until I do the K361 as well because I don't know how I feel about it yet because I haven't heard it yet. But some people might prefer it. I'm not sure yet. We will see what happens. But that's the K371. Wow. Well done, Harman. This is fantastic. I'll see you guys in the next review.